Firstly, if last weekend was the beginning of anything for someone, that's already a problem. Let's start there. Lest we forget, 2020 was the largest protest wave, and it wasn't just one day. It was for a long, protracted period of time with lots and lots of different sectors of people who had never been involved getting involved, right? 2020 was huge, and it was illustrative of the larger point, which is that protest, unless it leads to sustained organizing as opposed to mobilizing, right? Organizing meaning you're collecting names, you're getting people to do other actions all the time, right? Unless it's leading to that, it actually demobilizes the people because they go out and they feel like they have done something that they have not done. Now, I also said in my video, prove me wrong. Have you started doing that work? Have you done that work? Because some of us do that work all the time. And some of us have been doing that work all the time. So again, it is misrepresenting us to say that we just showed up to criticize because we didn't get everything we wanted, because that was never what I was saying. You're talking to someone who is, I'm not as young as I look. I have been around for quite some time. And I remember being when Black Lives Matter first started, like in 2014, 2015, those marches, those protests, which again went on for quite some time. And those were dangerous. We had to actually like outflank cops that were trying to kettle us in. It got rough out there. My counterpoint to you thinking that we need to learn more is maybe taking a step back and realizing that your positionality might be obscuring from you some of the realities that some of us face all the time. And one of the most important realities is that there needs to be critique of people who are just joining. There needs to be criticism of that because that's a problem inherently. If you are just now getting involved, that's a problem. And here's the thing. Some people have a really hard time. Some people have a really hard time with being told that they're not doing enough or that they're doing something wrong. And sometimes that's just the truth. It's not said out of malice. It's said because in order to do better, you have to be willing to hear what you are doing is not it, or that there are other people who have done that already and have steps that you could take to go further. You're doing the right's work for them in getting folks to look at people who are saying we need to do more for longer and in better ways, rather than putting the focus where it belongs on the people who are responsible, people who look more like you, people who are in more your demographic, people who you probably have been having literal family meals with this whole time. Okay? It is not us who need to learn more. And let me correct that. Of course, there is always more to learn. I'm always willing to hear and to listen. And that is why I'm having this conversation with you now, even though, again, I don't know you from a hole in the wall. The struggles of the past that have been successful, and I do know about the 3.5% rule, absolutely. But it's one of those things that people love to quote when they don't want to acknowledge that generally resistance is multifaceted and involves some things that we could not talk about here and that neither one of us would be involved in anyway. So when a queer Black person who is on technically the front lines every day of their life because of who they are, who has been doing this work in a bunch of ways for a long time, says, hey, that one march was not enough and y'all need to organize rather than mobilize. And I literally linked to Kwame Ture's speech on the subject, which I highly recommend you check out. We are not doing it to discourage. We are doing it to tell you what you may not know or may not have heard based on our experience. You could have taken my words as a call-in and maybe reference some of the other things that I have talked about or some of the things that I mentioned, but instead you decided you were going to defend yourself, right? Which is very, very peak this kind of supremacy, straight up. I was just working on a piece about the Black Panthers and the White Panthers. And the White Panthers, what they did, and whether or not they did it well is a subject for a different day, but they followed the work of the Black Panthers and they did it in their own communities and they did it following the same model. Right? Yes, my video was a call-in and it's one that needs to be made because a lot of people did walk away from it feeling better than they should have because they didn't walk away from it with any plans. And if the plan is just to keep going out into the streets every weekend even, that's not going to work because we know what they're going to do when they get bored. And I don't want that to happen to you because we saw what happened when the protests went on for too long. What we need to do is on multi levels. it's economic, it is social, it is political, it is on all those levels. And so the idea that just praising a one time thing run by essentially a Democrat front group that is basically funneling people to just keep voting until the heat death of the universe, like that's not the group that's actually going to bring people change. And you are actually helping the right by continuing to punch left at a time when what we need is for people to actually start doing the work every day in their lives. That is what my call to action was. So I would just say pump the brakes and maybe reach out privately if you want to have a discussion about what I mean instead of making an assumption and basically putting me in risk of being piled on by your followers, which is a bad look. You know what happened to all the Ferguson protesters from the original Black Lives Matter movement and protests? Look it up. It's not great. And I have looked at all of the stuff that has happened since and come up with more strategies and more ideas. And it's not based on just what's in my brain. It's by looking at history and it's by learning from other people, other countries, other movements, all of this stuff. The assumption that you're making is that we have not done that work, and we have. And I encourage you to do the same.